brother Catacora, President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, our sister Arce, President of ECOSOC, Brother Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations Organization, heads of state and government, brothers and sisters from social movements, civil society, and indigenous peoples of the world. First of all, I would like to express my thanks to the Republic of Tajikistan and the Kingdom of the Netherlands for their excellent preparation of this conference in their capacity as co-hosts. For the Plurinational State of Bolivia, this event is of historic significance, being the second water conference to take place under the auspices of the United Nations following a period of 46 years. At this time, I would like to share with you the fact that the political constitution of the state of my country recognizes water as a most fundamental right for life within the framework of the sovereignty of our peoples and on the basis of the principles of vivir bien, living well in harmony with Mother Earth. These constitute the contribution of our peoples to the emancipation of humanity. This constitutional recognition is the fruit of the labor of the Bolivian people. In the year 2000, they were mobilized in what was called the War of Water, and for the first time in history, they achieved that the rights of the peoples would take priority over the interests of private companies that claimed, in accordance with the view that was prevalent at the time in the neoliberal model, that sought to convert this natural resource into just one more commodity. This victory in broadening human rights beyond what are known as the first-generation rights that are well known has been brought into this universal house when Bolivia led the adoption of General Assembly Resolution 64/292. This resolution textually recognizes that the right to drinking water and sanitation is an essential human right in order for life to be fully enjoyed and for the enjoyment of all human rights. Brothers and sisters, today, after having achieved significant results under the Millennium Development Goals and with significant progress in implementation of the 2030 Agenda, all of the nations in the world are here to assess how far we have come and to make commitments in relation to what still remains to be done. The Plurinational State of Bolivia recognizes the importance of water as an indispensable part, a crucial element, not only for life of human beings, but also for the survival of our Mother Earth. If we do not change course, where we are is the product of a multidimensional crisis of capitalism. If we do not change course, humanity and the planet are in grave danger. According to data from the specialized bodies, by 2050, the planet will have some 10 billion inhabitants. This will bring with it greater demand for food, 50% greater, according to the data from the FAO. According to existing trends, in this same year, the demand for water will have multiplied twofold. And when we consider that 1/3 of the world's population lives in regions where there is water scarcity, and more than half of the global population would at that time be in danger because of hydric stress. As a result, hundreds of millions of people will suffer the tragedy of being displaced, with all of the loss and damage that this will cause globally, despite the great efforts that we are undertaking. As states, it is thought that 800 million people lack access to drinking water, and more than 2.5 billion people do not have access to basic sanitation. As a result, thousands of boys and girls die every day because of diseases linked to the lack of access to drinking water, sanitation, together with other grave consequences. The climate crisis is affecting the availability and demand for water. It is also affecting the frequency and intensity of flooding and droughts. The crisis of the lack of biodiversity and the loss of biodiversity also has a negative impact on ecosystemic functions linked to water. The pollution crisis has clear repercussions on health and socioeconomic activity. These crises are not a mere accident of history. They are the product of our patterns of consumption, which are irrational and need to be changed. We must build a material basis upon which societies can reproduce all forms of life. But the development of productive strength cannot endanger the disappearance of the planet and humanity. Sources of water around the world are experiencing very alarming hydric stress. The melting of the glaciers, which is speeding up, leads us to a scenario where in 2050 at least 1/3 of them will no longer have any glacial mass. This leads us, or should lead us, to move from a mere state of concern to immediate, joint and real, truly effective action. This climate crisis is also leading to the El Niño effect, which not only affects agricultural cycles, but clearly highlights the need to take measures to deal with the lack of water in many regions affected by this problem. For this reason, we must alert humanity as a whole that the crisis of water is not just an environmental problem. Rather, it is also a social and economic problem. Access to water and our ability to manage it in a sustainable way is directly linked to problems of poverty, inequality and injustice, which are the structural causes of a systemic and multidimensional crisis of capitalism. This is endangering the very life of the entire planet. As we move to assessing our progress in achieving Agenda 2030, we must recognize that the problems related to water are deeply rooted in current economic and development models. As a result, we must make the transition to a more sustainable economic and more equitable economic system is one that places value on the long-term health of Mother Earth and people above and beyond gain and profit. We must reaffirm the conviction that this collective effort is part of our commitment to the fate of humanity as a whole. This means that in order to transform this reality, we must move from a system that gives priority to production and reproduction of capital to one that gives priority to production and reproduction of life. We must also recognize that the burden of this water crisis is borne disproportionately by vulnerable communities, in particular by indigenous, originally peasant communities, by women, by boys and by girls. For this reason, any solution that we propose should prioritize the needs of these communities with equity, social, economic and ecological justice at its core. If we want a viable future for current and future generations, we must redouble our actions and commitments to change the system. We must recognize that another world is possible if we make it possible. In this regard, to reset the balance of rivers, lakes, aquifers, and the systems of life that are linked to the water on our planet, based on the wisdom of the peoples that make up our Plurinational State of Bolivia and its social organizations, as has been expressed in the various consultations ahead of this conference, we issue a call to take the following actions. First, reaffirm the right to drinking water and sanitation as a human right that is essential to life and to all human rights as established in Resolution 64/292. This resolution must be respected and guaranteed for all people and their systems of life. It requires the full and sustainable integration of other rights, eradicating poverty and other multiple forms of institutional rights ahead of other pandemics and crises. Second, recognizing that the next Earth Summit of 2024, at that time, we must recognize that water is at the core of life. Establishing rivers, lakes, glaciers, aquifers, basins, other systems of life linked to water and Mother Earth as collective rights holders, listening to their vulnerability and echoing the current threat that they are suffering in all parts of the world. Third, we must create an permanent intergovernmental mechanism for water at the United Nations. This should promote the handling, management, and conservation of water, the eradication of poverty, and the full development of this under the framework for international objectives relating to water, strengthening political, economic, social, environmental, and cultural commitments while giving priority to the collective interest over and above others. Fourth, calling for the appointment of a special envoy of the United Nations for water at the service of states. Their mission should be to activate this mechanism, and at the same time, they have a duty to report on their actions to the Assembly in a permanent fashion. Next, recognizing that the authorities of communal water management and basic sanitation of indigenous, originally peasant communities and local communities from their very conception should protect water as the sustenance of life and promote incentives and various types of methods for their amplification and strengthening. Next, establishing a coordination of debt if developing countries whose financial resources have been assigned to the provision of access to water and hydric adaptation and climate resilience according to the loss and damage suffered. Also, calling on developed countries to provide greater financial resources, technical and technological assistance and transference to the euphemistically called developing countries through international multilateral organisms to help them conserve water and mitigate the impacts of the water crisis. We also call on all countries to update their national legislation to guarantee protection and conservation of sources of water and ensure equitable access and fair access to water for all uses of all living people, promoting the participation of women, young people, indigenous peoples, Afro-descendant peoples, and vulnerable groups. Number 9, we recognize the important interconnectedness that exists between water, food sovereignty of our peoples, the generation of energy, and the systems of life, which are a fundamental basis of our integration and restoration of harmony with Mother Earth. 10. We must make water visible as an element of peace and integration between peoples to promote cooperation and protection of sources of water and rational and fair use of water basins and cross-border aquifers. Presidents, we must find a balance using all of our resources, all of our scientific and ancestral knowledge, our states, the bodies of the United Nations, in all of its forms, must work to preserve water and the future of life and guarantee that it can be used and enjoyed by all of humanity, and especially the vulnerable sectors who today do not have this right. For this reason, we call on all nations so that beyond our political and ideological differences, and it is normal for them to exist, we must work closely together in the near future to ensure that every person has access to clean and safe water while ensuring the integrity of our Mother Earth. Finally, we propose that the year 2024 should be made the International Year of Water for Life, and it should be promoted from all states with the active participation of social communities and organizations. There should be great mobilization of action across all levels so that we can tackle the global water crisis. We are sons and daughters of our Mother Earth. Our bodies are made up of approximately 65% water. Our brain is actually 70% water. For this reason, we are water, and every form of life depends on water. Now is the time. Thank you.